A quantum physicist died in a plane crash in 1979. His name was Itzhak Bentov. He was 56 years old, sitting in seat 22D on American Airlines Flight 191 out of Chicago. The left engine ripped off during takeoff. Everyone on board died. And the thing is, Bentov knew he was running out of time, not because he predicted the crash, but because for the last decade of his life, he had been racing to publish research that he believed could change the way human beings relate to money, health, and reality itself. Research that the scientific establishment wanted nothing to do with. Before that crash, Bentov discovered something about your brain that explains why wealth keeps slipping through your fingers, no matter how hard you try to attract it. He found that the human brain operates on a default frequency, a mechanical rhythm buried so deep in your nervous system that you can't feel it, you can't think your way past it, and unless you know it's there, you will spend your entire life fighting against it every time you try to build abundance. Not because the universe is punishing you, not because you're doing affirmations wrong, but because your body was never designed to accept wealth in the first place. It was designed to keep you alive. And those are two very different operating systems. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 3 frequency shifts Bentov identified that keep your brain locked in what he called the survival band, and the exact techniques he developed to break free from each one. These aren't abstract concepts. These are practices you can start tonight. And if you've been doing everything the manifestation world tells you to do and still feel stuck, what you're about to hear will probably explain why. Before I get into the 3 shifts, I need to tell you who Itzhak Bentov actually was. Because this isn't a guru story. This isn't a monk on a mountain. This is an engineer, a guy with patents, a guy who built medical devices that are still used in hospitals today. Bentov was born in Czechoslovakia in 1923. He survived the Holocaust. He fought in the Israeli War of Independence. Then he moved to the United States and became a biomedical inventor. He designed the first cardiac catheter that could be steered inside the heart. Think about that. A device that goes inside a beating human heart and navigates through blood vessels. That's precision. That's someone who understands how physical systems work at the most intimate level. But while he was building medical devices by day, Bentov was doing something else at night. He was strapping himself to oscilloscopes, EEG machines, and custom-built sensors in his home lab in Boston. He was measuring what happens to the human body during deep meditation, not in a spiritual sense, in a mechanical sense. He wanted to know what physically changes in the body when someone enters an altered state of consciousness. And what he found after years of measurement was that the human body is not a solid object. It's a vibrating system. A system of pendulums, each oscillating at its own rhythm. Your heart is a pendulum, your lungs are a pendulum, your brain generates electromagnetic oscillations. Even your cerebrospinal fluid, the liquid surrounding your brain and spinal cord, pulses up and down your spine about 12 times per minute. He published his findings in a book called Stalking the Wild Pendulum in 1977. The scientific community largely dismissed it. 2 years later, he was dead. But here's what matters for you and me today. Inside that research, Bentov mapped out something he called the hierarchy of body rhythms, a system of interlocking oscillations that determines your baseline state of consciousness. Not your thoughts, not your beliefs, your actual physiological state, the frequency your body returns to when you're not actively trying to be somewhere else. And he discovered that this baseline, this default setting, is what controls whether your nervous system accepts or rejects new patterns of experience, including wealth. Let me explain exactly how this works. Your body has a resting frequency, not a metaphorical one, a literal, measurable one. Bentov documented this through hundreds of hours of monitoring subjects in meditation. He found that when a person is sitting still, doing nothing, thinking about nothing in particular, their body settles into a characteristic oscillation pattern. The heart generates a standing wave through the aorta. That wave bounces off the bifurcation point in the lower abdomen and returns upward. This creates a micro-rocking motion in the skull, about 7 microns of movement, back and forth, at roughly 7 cycles per second. 7 cycles per second. That number matters. It sits right at the border between theta and alpha brainwave states. And Bentov argued that this frequency, this specific mechanical rhythm, is your body's definition of normal. It's the frequency your nervous system identifies as home. Now here's the critical insight. Everything you experience throughout the day, every emotion, every thought, every interaction, temporarily shifts your body's oscillation. You get excited, the frequency goes up. You get anxious, it spikes in a different pattern. You feel deep peace during meditation, it drops into a slower wave. But after the experience passes, what happens? The pendulum swings back to baseline. Always. Think about what this means for wealth manifestation. You sit down to meditate. You visualize your bank account with $1 million. You feel the excitement, the gratitude, the expansion. Your body's frequency temporarily shifts upward into a pattern that matches what Bentov would call the abundance band, a higher coherence oscillation where the body and brain are synchronized. You feel amazing. You feel like it's working. You open your eyes, and then you check your email. There's a bill, your stomach tightens, your shoulders go up, and within 30 minutes, sometimes 5, your body has dragged you back to the survival band. That resting frequency of 7 cycles per second, the home base. This is not a willpower problem. This is not a faith problem. This is a physics problem. The pendulum has momentum, and the momentum of decades of oscillation at survival frequency is enormous. One 20-minute meditation isn't going to overcome it. Not 10, not 100, unless you change the approach. Bentov compared it to pushing a child on a swing. If you push randomly, nothing happens. The swing jerks back and forth with no rhythm. But if you push at exactly the right moment, at the natural frequency of the swing, tiny pushes accumulate into massive motion. The swing goes higher and higher with minimal effort. He said the same principle applies to shifting your baseline. You can't brute force it with intensity. You have to find the natural frequency of the shift and work with it, not against it. But here's where most people go wrong. Bentov identified 3 distinct layers of resistance that the survival baseline uses to pull you back. Understanding these is critical because each one requires a different kind of intervention. The first layer is muscular tension. Your muscles hold memory, not figuratively, measurably. Wilhelm Reich documented this in the 1930s, and Bentov confirmed it with his own instruments. When your body has spent years associating financial stress with danger, that association gets stored as chronic microtension in specific muscle groups: the jaw, the diaphragm, the psoas, the deep hip muscle that connects your spine to your legs. Every time you try to shift into an abundant state, these muscles fire a low-level contraction signal that your brain interprets as something is wrong, and the pendulum swings back. The second layer is autonomic patterning. Your autonomic nervous system, the system that controls your heartbeat, digestion, breathing, all the things you don't consciously manage, has been calibrated since infancy. If you grew up in an environment where money was a source of stress, your autonomic nervous system literally wired itself to produce a stress response whenever financial stimuli appear. Not because you choose to be stressed, because the wiring was laid down before you had words. The third layer is what Bentov called the acoustic signature. This is the most subtle and the most powerful. Every organ in your body produces sound, not audible sound, infrasonic waves. Your heart, your lungs, your intestines, even your bones resonate at specific frequencies. Together they create a composite waveform that Bentov called your acoustic signature, and he argued that this signature is what the quantum field actually reads when determining what you attract, not your thoughts, not your words, your body's sound. If your acoustic signature is broadcasting survival, scarcity, contraction, vigilance, then that's the frequency the field responds to. No amount of positive thinking changes the broadcast. You have to change the sound. So the question becomes, how do you actually change a baseline that has 3 layers of defense? How do you shift a pendulum that's been swinging at the same frequency for 20, 30, 40 years? Bentov developed 3 specific frequency shifts to address each layer. One for the muscular, one for the autonomic, one for the acoustic signature, and they have to be done in order because each one opens the door for the next. Let me walk you through the first one. The first shift is so counterintuitive that when I first encountered it, I thought Bentov had made an error. Every manifestation teacher on the planet tells you to raise your frequency. Think higher, feel higher, vibrate higher. Bentov said the opposite, and when you understand his reasoning, you'll realize he was right, and everyone else has been working against basic physics. In Stalking the Wild Pendulum, Bentov makes an observation that changes everything. He writes about what happens to a pendulum at the extreme points of its swing. At the top of the arc, the moment right before it reverses direction, the pendulum is technically motionless. For an infinitesimal fraction of a second, it's not moving at all. Zero velocity, zero momentum. Bentov calls this the zero motion point, and he argues that this point is not just a physical phenomenon, it's a gateway. Because at zero motion, the pendulum is no longer defined by its swing. It's undefined. It exists in a state of pure potential. It could swing in any direction, at any amplitude, at any frequency. All options are open. He applied this directly to the human body. If your body is a system of pendulums, then there must be a zero motion point in your physiological oscillation, a moment where the survival baseline isn't operating, where the mechanical rhythm briefly flatlines, and in that moment, that tiny gap, the system is reprogrammable. The trick is getting there. Most meditation teaches you to breathe evenly, 4 counts in, 4 counts out, or box breathing, 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. Bentov said this is precisely wrong for what we're trying to do. Symmetric breathing reinforces the existing rhythm. It's like pushing the swing at the same frequency it's already going. You're strengthening the baseline, not disrupting it. What you need is asymmetric deceleration, a breathing pattern that gradually slows the pendulum until it reaches zero motion. Here's the protocol Bentov used, and I'm going to break it into 3 phases because jumping straight to the final ratio doesn't work for most people. Phase 1. You breathe in through the nose for 5 counts, hold for 2 counts, breathe out through the nose for 8 counts. 5 to 8, do this for 3 minutes. What's happening here is that the extended exhale is activating your vagus nerve, the longest nerve in your body, running from your brainstem to your gut. When the exhale exceeds the inhale, the vagus nerve sends a signal to your brain that says, "We are safe." Your heart rate drops. Your blood pressure drops. The first layer of muscular resistance begins to soften. Phase 2. After 3 minutes, shift the ratio. Breathe in for 6 counts. Hold for 3. Breathe out for 10. 6, 3, 10. This is a deeper deceleration. At this ratio, most people start to feel a heaviness in their limbs. Your arms might feel like they weigh twice as much. Your jaw relaxes. This is the psoas, that deep hip muscle I mentioned, finally releasing its chronic contraction. Some people feel an emotion come up at this point, a flash of sadness, a memory, that stored tension exiting the muscular layer. Let it pass. Don't engage with it. Just keep breathing. Phase 3. After another 3 minutes, move to the final ratio. 7 counts in, 4 counts hold, 11 counts out. 7, 4, 11. This is the ratio Bentov used on himself. The asymmetry at this level is aggressive enough that your nervous system can't predict the rhythm. It keeps trying to find the pattern and failing. And when the prediction engine fails, something remarkable happens. The autonomic patterning, that second layer of resistance, momentarily loses its grip. You'll know when you hit the zero motion point because it doesn't feel like anything. That's the paradox. It's not blissful. It's not peaceful. It's not anything. It's an absence, a gap. You're awake, you're aware, but the usual background hum of your nervous system goes quiet. No sensation, no emotion, no narrative, just space. That's the window. This isn't mysticism. The vagal tone research from Stephen Porges, the polyvagal theory, confirms exactly what Bentov found. When you stimulate the ventral vagal complex through extended exhalation, you shift the autonomic nervous system from sympathetic dominance, fight or flight, to parasympathetic dominance, rest and digest. But Bentov went further. He argued that there's a state beyond parasympathetic dominance, a state where the autonomic system essentially pauses, neither fight-flight nor rest-digest, a neutral zone. Modern neuroscience has a name for something similar. It's called the default mode network suppression. When the DMN, the brain network responsible for your sense of self, your narrative identity, your constant mental chatter, goes quiet. The brain enters a state of heightened plasticity. New connections become possible. Old patterns loosen. Bentov found this state mechanically in the 1970s. Neuroscience confirmed it with fMRI machines 40 years later. And here's the part that matters for wealth. When the DMN suppresses and the autonomic system pauses, your brain is no longer running the survival program. The pendulum has reached zero motion. The guard is down. The system is listening. 3 mistakes people make with this breathing technique. I want to address them now so you don't waste time. First mistake, counting too fast. Each count should be roughly 1 second. If you're rushing through a 7-count inhale in 3 seconds, you're not getting the deceleration effect. Use a metronome app. Set it to 60 BPM, 1 count per beat. Second mistake, breathing through the mouth. The nasal passages have resistance that the mouth doesn't. That resistance is part of what generates the vagal response. Mouth breathing bypasses it. Nose only, both directions. Third mistake, trying to feel something at the zero motion point. I mentioned this already, but it's worth repeating because it trips up almost everyone. The zero motion point is defined by absence. If you're searching for a sensation, you're activating the very narrative machinery that needs to be offline. When it happens, you won't realize it happened until a few seconds later. You'll notice a gap in your awareness, like a missing frame in a film. That gap is the window, and it usually lasts between 5 and 15 seconds, which brings us to the critical question: what do you do inside that window? What you do in that 5 to 15 second window is the difference between a nice meditation and an actual rewiring of your relationship with wealth. And this is where Bentov broke from every manifestation teacher before and after him, because his answer to "what do you do inside the gap" is the opposite of what you'd expect. It's the opposite of what Neville Goddard taught. It's the opposite of what The Secret popularized. And when you understand the physics behind it, you'll see exactly why his approach works when everything else keeps failing. Bentov spent a lot of his career studying resonance, not in the spiritual sense, in the literal physical sense. His medical devices relied on it. A cardiac catheter needs to respond to the resonant frequencies of blood flow. His steerable catheter worked because he understood how vibrations transfer between systems. And the fundamental law of resonance is this: for 2 systems to exchange energy, 3 conditions must be met. First, they must be capable of vibrating at a similar frequency. Second, there must be a medium through which the vibration can travel. And third, this is the one everyone misses, the receiving system must not already be oscillating at a competing frequency. Think about a tuning fork. You strike a 440 Hz fork and hold it near another 440 Hz fork. The second fork starts vibrating. Resonance. Beautiful. But try this. Strike the second fork first at a random frequency. Then hold the 440 fork next to it. What happens? The second fork keeps vibrating at its own frequency. The 440 signal gets drowned out. The transfer fails. The receiving system has to be empty, or at least quieter than the incoming signal, for resonance to work. Now apply this to manifestation. You sit down to attract wealth. Your intention is the broadcast. The quantum field, as Bentov understood it, is the medium, and your body is the receiving system. But your body is already vibrating. It's vibrating at the survival frequency. It's broadcasting scarcity through every layer: muscular, autonomic, acoustic. You're trying to tune into a wealth signal while your own internal speakers are blasting static. This is why the first shift, the breathing, the zero motion point, is not optional. It's not a warm-up. It's the prerequisite. You need to quiet the receiving system before you can imprint a new frequency. Inside the zero motion gap, Bentov said you do something that will feel wrong to everyone who's ever practiced visualization. You don't visualize. Nothing. No image. No scene. No mansion. No bank account. No sports car. No financial freedom. Nothing visual at all. Instead, you hold a feeling, a pure imageless feeling. Let me explain the difference because it's subtle and it matters enormously. When you visualize a mansion, your brain processes that image through the visual cortex. The visual cortex is part of the neocortex, the newest, most rational part of your brain. The neocortex is also where your reality testing function lives. The moment you generate an image of a mansion, your neocortex immediately compares that image to your current reality. And if there's a mismatch, which there will be because you don't currently live in a mansion, it triggers a cognitive dissonance response, a tiny signal that says, "This is imaginary." That tiny signal is enough to reactivate the survival baseline. The pendulum starts swinging again, the window closes, but a feeling without an image. There's nothing for the neocortex to test against reality. You can't compare a raw sensation to your bank account. You can't fact-check an emotion. The reality testing function has nothing to grab onto. Bentov described the target feeling like this, not the excitement of having money, not the relief of paying off debt, not the pride of being wealthy. Those are all emotional responses to specific scenarios. They carry images inside them. The feeling he described is more elemental. He called it fullness without content. He said it's similar to what you feel in the moment right after a deep laugh, when the laughing has stopped, but the expansion in your chest hasn't collapsed yet. Or the feeling on a warm afternoon when you've eaten just the right amount of food and you're sitting in a comfortable chair and you have nowhere to be. Not happy exactly, not grateful exactly, just full, complete, like nothing is missing. He also described it as a quiet heaviness, like a tree that knows its roots go deep. You're not reaching for something, you're not expecting something, you're resting in the sensation of already being full. Finding this feeling is harder than it sounds, because most of us don't know what wealth actually feels like in the body. We know what wanting wealth feels like. That's a tightness in the chest, a reaching forward, a tension, but the feeling of already having it, of being complete. Here's an exercise Bentov gave to his students. Don't do this during the breathing protocol. Do this separately, as training, until you can access the feeling reliably. Sit comfortably. Close your eyes. Think about a time in your life, any time, when you wanted nothing. Not a peak experience, not an achievement, just a moment when everything was fine and you had no desire pulling you forward. Maybe you were 8 years old, lying in grass, watching clouds. Maybe you were sitting with a friend in complete silence and it felt right. Maybe you were halfway through a long walk and your mind went blank for a few minutes. Find that memory, not the details of it, the feeling of it, the physical sensation. Where do you feel it in your body? Most people report it as a warmth or heaviness in the belly and chest. Some feel it as a softening in the muscles around the eyes. Bentov said it almost always centers in the solar plexus, the nerve bundle behind your stomach. Isolate that sensation. Let the memory fade. Let the details dissolve. Just keep the feeling, that rawness, that fullness with nothing attached to it. Now, and this is important, notice that the feeling has no images in it. No mansion, no car, no numbers. It's pre-verbal, pre-visual. It's just a frequency, a vibrational state that your body recognizes as complete. That's your imprint signal. That's what you hold during the zero motion window. There's a growing body of research on what psychologists call interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense your internal bodily states. A 2019 study at the University of Sussex found that people with higher interoceptive awareness make better financial decisions, not because they feel their way to answers, but because their internal body signals are more accurate predictors of future outcomes than their conscious reasoning. Bentov would not have been surprised by this. His entire model is built on the idea that the body's frequency, its actual vibrational state, is a more honest signal than anything the conscious mind produces. Your thoughts can lie, your visualizations can be fantasies, but the frequency your body is broadcasting, that's your real state. And the field, whatever you want to call it, reads the real state, not the performance. This is why two people can do the exact same visualization exercise and get completely different results. It's not about the quality of the visualization. It's about the frequency the body is broadcasting while the visualization is happening. One person's body is broadcasting fullness, the other's is broadcasting want. Same exercise, different signal, different outcome. How long do you hold the feeling during the zero motion window? As long as the window stays open. For beginners, that's 5 to 15 seconds. For experienced practitioners, Bentov reported windows of up to 2 minutes. The window tends to expand naturally with practice. You don't force it. And how many times do you need to do this before you see effects? Bentov was honest about this. He said a single session can produce a temporary shift that lasts hours. But for the shift to become structural, for the baseline to actually move, you need repetition. Specifically, he said the minimum effective dose is 1 session per day for 21 consecutive days. Not because 21 is a magic number, but because that's approximately how long it takes for the body's slowest oscillation cycles, the ones governing deep autonomic patterns, to complete a full reset. But 21 days of the breathing plus the imprint still isn't enough, because there's a third factor. A factor that determines whether the shift holds permanently or fades within 72 hours of stopping. And almost nobody talks about this part. Not in the manifestation world, not in the meditation world, not even in most discussions of Bentov's work. The third shift is the one that locks everything in place. Without it, the first 2 shifts degrade over time, like writing in sand near the tide line. You make the mark and the water erases it. Bentov said this third mechanism is the reason 90% of people who have genuine spiritual breakthroughs during meditation lose them within a week. They access the right state, they feel the shift, and then they let their body's nightly calibration process overwrite it, because they don't know what the body does during the transition from waking to sleep and how to use that transition as a programming window. Every night, as you transition from waking to sleeping, your brain passes through a state called the hypnagogic phase. It's the twilight zone between consciousness and unconsciousness. You're not awake, but you're not asleep. You might see flashes of imagery, faces, landscapes, abstract shapes. Your body might jerk. Your sense of where you are in space gets unreliable. Most people treat this as nothing, just the brain shutting down for the night. Noise on the way to sleep. Bentov treated it as the single most important moment of the entire day. Here's what he found. During the hypnagogic phase, the brain shifts from beta wave dominance, your normal waking frequency of about 14 to 30 cycles per second, down through alpha into theta, which sits at about 4 to 7 cycles per second. This descent takes approximately 3 to 5 minutes, and during this descent, something happens that doesn't happen at any other time. The brain conducts what Bentov described as a calibration sweep, like a computer running a system check before shutdown. It scans the body's oscillation patterns, takes a snapshot of the current state, and writes that snapshot to long-term memory as the reference baseline. The operating parameters for the next cycle, whatever frequency your body is holding during that 3 to 5 minute window, gets recorded as normal, not permanently from one night, but cumulatively. Night after night, the calibration sweep updates the baseline using a weighted average. Newer snapshots carry more weight than older ones, but the old ones don't disappear. They get gradually overwritten. This is why habits take time to form. This is why trauma takes time to heal. This is why people who go on meditation retreats feel transformed for a week and then slowly return to their old patterns. They didn't change the nightly calibration. They changed the daytime state, went home, fell asleep in their old emotional patterns, and the calibration sweep recorded the old frequency again. And this is why Bentov said the hypnagogic phase is the key to permanent change. The practice itself sounds deceptively simple, but the execution requires precision, so I'm going to break it down into specific steps. Step 1. Do your breathing protocol and imprint work earlier in the evening, not right before bed. Bentov recommended doing the main practice, the asymmetric breathing, the zero motion gap, the imageless feeling, at least 2 hours before sleep. This gives your body time to integrate the shift before the calibration sweep. Why not right before bed? Because the breathing protocol is an active practice. It requires concentration, counting, awareness. That level of mental engagement puts your brain in alpha at best, usually beta. If you go from active practice straight to bed, you carry beta band activity into the hypnagogic phase, and the calibration sweep records that alert, focused state rather than the fullness state you're trying to lock in. Step 2. In the 30 minutes before sleep, do nothing stimulating. No screens, no reading, no conversation. Bentov was strict about this. He said the last 30 minutes before sleep should be as boring as possible. Not relaxing in the active sense, not guided meditation, not gentle music, not gratitude journaling. Boring. Minimal input. The goal is to let your brain's activity level decay naturally, like a ball rolling down a gentle hill into the hypnagogic valley. Step 3. When you get into bed and close your eyes, recall the feeling from your earlier practice. Not the breathing, not the technique, just the feeling of fullness, that quiet heaviness. You don't need to be precise. You don't need to achieve the feeling. You just need to point your awareness in its direction, like remembering the taste of a meal without actually eating it. A faint echo is enough. Step 4. And this is the crucial part. As you feel yourself tipping over the edge into sleep, do not try to hold the feeling. Let it hold you. The distinction matters. If you're gripping the feeling, you're activating effort. Effort is a beta band activity. It shows up on the calibration sweep as tension. Instead, let the feeling be the background. Let it be the water you're floating in as you sink into sleep. You don't hold on to water. You just stop fighting it and let it support you. You'll probably lose awareness of the feeling as you cross the threshold. That's fine, that's expected. The calibration sweep doesn't need your conscious participation. It reads the body's frequency, not your thoughts. If your body is holding the fullness frequency, even faintly, when the sweep runs, that's what gets recorded. Step 5. Repeat for 21 consecutive nights. Bentov was emphatic about the consecutive part. If you miss a night, the old baseline gets a fresh recording. You're not starting over from zero, the accumulated shifts don't vanish, but you lose momentum. Like rolling a boulder up a hill, stop pushing and it slides back a few feet. Bentov said that in practice, most people see the first tangible results around day 8 to 12. Things start feeling different, not in a dramatic way, in a subtle way. You catch yourself responding to a financial stressor with curiosity instead of anxiety. You notice that your first thought upon waking isn't about money worries. The background hum changes key. Modern sleep science has a name for what Bentov was describing. It's called sleep-dependent memory consolidation. During the transition from waking to sleeping, and again during specific phases of sleep itself, the brain replays and consolidates the dominant experiences and emotional patterns of the day. The hippocampus transfers information to the neocortex. Neural pathways that were active during the day get strengthened or pruned based on how they were used. A 2017 study from the University of Bern found that material presented during the hypnagogic phase could be recalled after waking, even though the subjects were not consciously aware they were learning. The brain was recording input during the transition, exactly as Bentov described. A separate line of research on targeted memory reactivation, where specific cues are presented during sleep to strengthen particular memories, has shown that the sleeping brain can be influenced to consolidate specific patterns preferentially. This isn't fringe science. It's published in Nature Neuroscience and Current Biology. Bentov didn't have fMRI machines or polysomnography equipment. He had oscilloscopes and homemade sensors, but his conclusions about the hypnagogic phase as a programming window have been validated by 4 decades of sleep research that came after him. Let me address the 3 most common obstacles people hit during the 21-night protocol. Problem 1. You can't recall the feeling when you get into bed. It's been 2 hours since your practice and the feeling has faded. This is normal for the first week. The fix is to create a physical anchor during your earlier practice. When you're in the fullness state during the zero motion gap, gently press your thumb and index finger together on one hand. Hold that press for 10 seconds while the feeling is strongest. Do this every session. After about 5 days, pressing those fingers together will bring a faint echo of the feeling, even without the breathing protocol. Use that anchor when you get into bed. Problem 2. Your mind races when you try to fall asleep. You're thinking about work, relationships, tomorrow's schedule. You can't get to the feeling because the mental noise is too loud. Bentov's solution was not to fight the thoughts. He said fighting thoughts is like fighting the pendulum. It strengthens the oscillation. Instead, he suggested treating the thoughts like cars on a highway viewed from an overpass. You see them pass. You don't get in any of them. And behind the highway, in the background, you hold the faintest sense of the fullness feeling. It doesn't need to be the foreground. Background is sufficient. The calibration sweep reads the body, not the thought stream. Problem 3. You fall asleep too fast. You get into bed and you're out in 60 seconds. No time to establish the feeling. 2 options. First, Bentov suggested elevating your head slightly, an extra pillow or a folded blanket, to slow the descent into sleep. When your head is elevated, the body's drainage of alertness-promoting cerebrospinal fluid happens slightly slower. You buy yourself an extra 2 to 3 minutes. Second, set a gentle alarm for 6 hours after falling asleep. When you wake naturally from a sleep cycle, you re-enter the hypnagogic phase as you fall back asleep. This second window is actually easier to use because you're already in a theta-dominant state. Fall back asleep with the fullness feeling and let the calibration sweep do its work. Let me bring this all together so you see the complete system. Your body operates on a default frequency, the survival band. That frequency has 3 layers of defense: muscular tension, autonomic patterning, and the acoustic signature. These 3 layers conspire to pull you back to scarcity every time you try to shift toward abundance. The first shift, asymmetric breathing to the zero motion point, disrupts the first 2 layers. The extended exhale releases muscular tension through the vagus nerve. The asymmetric ratio confuses the autonomic prediction engine. And at the zero motion point, both systems briefly go offline. The pendulum stops. The second shift, the resonance imprint, plants a new frequency during that window. Not through visualization, which triggers the neocortex's reality testing function and reactivates the survival response. Through imageless feeling, a pure vibrational signal that bypasses cognitive resistance because there's nothing for the brain to argue with, fullness without content, completion without a story. The third shift, the hypnagogic lock, writes the new frequency to the body's long-term baseline during the nightly calibration sweep. This is what turns a temporary state into a permanent trait. Without the third shift, the first 2 wash away. With it, the baseline itself begins to move. 1 session per day. Breathing practice plus imprint in the evening, at least 2 hours before bed. 30 minutes of minimal stimulation before sleep, then the fullness feeling as you cross the hypnagogic threshold. 21 consecutive nights. That's the protocol. 3 shifts, 1 sequence. Working with your biology instead of against it. Bentov was careful to say that the results of this work don't look like what the manifestation industry promises. You probably won't wake up on day 22 with $1 million in your account. That's not how baseline shifts work. What happens is more like a slow-motion recalibration of your entire relationship with money and abundance. Your default emotional response to financial situations changes. Opportunities that were always there but invisible to you start registering. Decisions that used to feel impossible start feeling obvious. People and circumstances that align with abundance begin appearing in your field. Not because you summoned them, but because your acoustic signature changed and now you're resonating at a frequency that attracts different patterns. Bentov compared it to tuning a radio dial. When you shift from 91.1 to 91.5, you don't create a new radio station. The station was always broadcasting. You just couldn't hear it because you were tuned to the wrong frequency. The wealth was always available. Your body was tuned to survival. So that's Itzhak Bentov's 3-part framework for reprogramming your brain's relationship with wealth: the zero motion gap, the resonance imprint, and the hypnagogic lock. 3 quantum frequency shifts that work with your nervous system instead of against it. Bentov died at 56 with most of his consciousness research still unpublished. His wife, Myrtala, spent years after his death organizing his notes and publishing A Brief Tour of Higher Consciousness, a book that reads like a physicist's field guide to reality itself. Most of the manifestation world has never heard of him, and the people who have heard of him usually know him for stalking the wild pendulum, but miss the practical applications entirely. What I keep coming back to is something Bentov wrote in his private notes. He said the reason most people never build wealth isn't that they don't want it enough. It isn't that they don't believe hard enough. It's that their body, the instrument through which consciousness operates, has been tuned to a frequency that rejects abundance, the same way a radio tuned to FM rejects AM signals. The signal is there, the music is playing, but the receiver can't hear it. And no amount of wishing will change the tuning, only physics will. If you want to go deeper into Bentov's work, specifically how he used quantum field theory to explain why consciousness shapes reality at all, and why he believed that most people are using the law of attraction exactly backwards, I cover that in the next video.